Welcome back to another programming video. Python is our programming language of choice, and we are concluding on the chapter on the data structure. So without wasting further time, let's jump straight into it. Now, this is our kind of a plan for today, and I've gone ahead and created more or less robust dictionary. And just as a refresher, dictionaries actually are created using curly braces, open and close. You need to have a key, and then you need to pass an associated value to that key. And it could be a string, could be an integer, it could be a dictionary, like in our case, where we actually capturing similar information for each individual. In our case, Kwame Nkrumah, Nelson Mandela, Wangari Maathai, Chinua Achebe. I hope I'm pronouncing those names accurately. And we have information about them. Now, just a disclaimer here, these are not actual numbers, so don't go and dial them. These are just random numbers, phone numbers that I've just typed in. And if they happen to be someone's number, forgive me about that. I just couldn't find anything else. Anyway, so we have these, and what we actually want to do is, as a way of revision, just to go through some of the things that we've touched already in the past videos in this section. We just gonna like look at what can be done, or what else can we learn extra, and some of those stuff. So the first thing here to highlight is about the value of the keys within this contact book dictionary. Now, yes, you can have repetitive keys for the values of the keys because in this way we are kind of structuring in our use case, we assuming that every person whose information we're capturing is going to be consistent across the data. Now, there might be cases where you want to have extra information about an individual and not about others, which I'm going to show you down the line as we progress. Now, this is a case where we have similar information for everybody. Now, how that works is, unlike your list where you have a series of data comma separated within between the square brackets where you can just loop through and then just print each value based on the inbuilt index of that list. In this case, we're dealing with Miss Dictionary, and the way to go about accessing them is slightly different. Now, it's not as complicated as you would think, and I'm demonstrating it. I'm gonna demonstrate that in this example. Now, this is just a normal print. We're just printing normal text, hard-coded, nothing to go and explain. But here is where it becomes interesting. We still have our for loop. We have two variables. The one is name, the one is info, and this can be any value you want of your liking. But just pay attention to the comma that separate the two values, because this tells you what information we're getting from the contact book as we loop through each item within them. Now, something else to pay attention to is items. Items allows us to access the values of the key and its associated value. Now, there are other options. In fact, there are three of them when it comes to dictionary. The first one is going to be items. I'm going to show because based on that I can expand, meaning extract those two values, name and info. A name will represent the key, and info will represent the value associated to that key. And then once I have that information, as I'm looping through, I'm going to print the name, as you can see, and I'm going to access the information, which is a dictionary, and then pass in the key of the value that I actually want to output. So if I run this code like that, that's exactly what you see. simple as nothing complicated. Now, another thing that I'm going to show you is, which is there might be a use case for that. Simple, if you just want to access the keys, what you do, instead of passing items, you're going to pass keys. Simple. That's what I like about Python. You don't have to think about a very complex name just to, just reference it, You don't have to think about it. It's a key you're looking for, pass in keys, and it returns keys. Now, what that means is that this variables, one of them will represent the key, as usually going to be the first one. So the second one will throw you an error. So in this matter of fact, if I run that, you can see there's too many values to unpack. That's because in line 26, we're only getting the keys, so we cannot unpack what doesn't exist. That's what keys does, so it just returns that. So what we want to do is remove that and comment this out, because we can see already it's saying it's not defined. So to avoid getting some errors, so we're gonna run that again, and then this time around we're only getting keys, as you can see here. Now the other option that we have is values. Simple, right? You don't have to think about it too much. So you just pass in values, say, hey, I want from this contact book, as you loop through them, I just want you to return the values. And then if you run the code again, guess what? You're only getting the values. Now, I hope that makes sense, clear enough. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna undo this, and then we can have our items back. Now, what items does behind the scene, which is very that could probably explain why we have these name commas info, it returns a list of tuples, and the way you access tuples is by basically, and this is what a tuple will look like. So if you hover over this, it tells you it's a dictionary string with a dictionary, basically the structure that we have somewhere here, more or less. So we have a list of tuples, and the first tuple that we can see is the following, and you can see that it's comma separated. So when I'm saying name, I'm basically grabbing this value. If I say info, I'm grabbing the second value, which allows me then to point exactly, pass in the key of the item that I'm trying to retrieve. So that's basically what's happening behind the scenes. So that's just something to keep in mind when using item, as to why do we have this and all of that. So that's basically the reason behind it. So now moving on, I'm going to be touching on how to add a contact. And in this case, I'm going to touch on the additional key value value pair that we can add that doesn't exist in the previous one. Now, and that key value pair is going to be the hobby one. So I know this was supposed to be a revision, but I thought, well, while we're here, we might as well touch on this. And how you add a new value to the dictionary, you basically use the same name dictionary that you already created, square bracket, close bracket, open close square bracket, and you pass in the key or the new key that you want to pass in. Ideally, you don't want to pass in something that already exists, unless you're intentionally looking to replace it. In that case, yes, that will work. And then you pass in the value as to what you want to pass in. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an entire dictionary. Yes, in our case, it could just be a string. It could just be one value. It's all up to you, depending on what your use case is. Now, in our case, instead of just passing in the usual phone number, email, and city, we're also adding hobby, and we're passing tennis as being the hobby for this individual. Now, once we've done that, we're going to kind of run the same code that we ran before, and we're gonna notice there will be an updater there, and we're using item because we want to look through the key as well as the value associated, and something exceptional, which is going to be our line. So what we actually want is because not everybody has a hobby defined in their value. As a matter of fact, if we go back, we can see that the there's nobody with a hobby as an item uh, part of the information being collected for each individual. So we're only adding a hobby here when it comes to the newly added contact. So now what we want to do is for the hobby we get, so info.get, that's how we go about checking that. We get the, instead of, if you don't want to do it this way, you can also use this way, which is info.get, and then you open close bracket, and in the first part of the bracket you want to pass in the key that you're trying to get, and if that value exists, it will return the value. If it doesn't, the default value would then be none. So for everybody else that does not have a hobby as as part of the information, then it will still pass in hobby, but it will say none. That's what we should be seeing, and for each item. So we're gonna run that one more time. Guess what? We have contact updated here. This is what we're looking for. And then we can see hobby none, hobby none, hobby none, hobby none, and then hobby tennis. So that is the newly the contact we just added now that has a hobby of tennis. Awesome, right? Now, last on the list for this revision, we're gonna do a search, and the search basically allows us to kind of think about how we want to structure our information, because the other thing also that you need to pay attention to when building this kind of dictionary, and it's on the as a section of your code, or maybe at the beginning, you want to think about how you're going to structure this. Now, dictionary just have that inbuilt benefit that it allows for that flexibility to add additional information in the future should that become necessary. And that flexibility means that you can allow yourself, I mean, even if you're saving this to a database, you can have a whole new field that only stored this information in this format. And as the system or the code or whatever platform uses the database grows and more information becomes required, it's easy to kind of make improvement or request for that information from your users and save that in the same field without having to make major changes in your database. So those are some of the things you can think about when using this kind of data structure. And also between, for example, the website where the form is, if there's a form that collects information and the user press submit, and between that website and the back end of your code or the database, the data has to transit, meaning it has to travel between those points and in a secure way, obviously. So the structure could also be, and I think this is the most commonly used structure on the internet, commonly called JSON. So the structure kind of allow you to have that approach where data is being captured in a way that is very useful and friendly, and also can be updated on the fly without having to worry about some precast structure that does not allow for changes or mutation as the environment the condition present themselves. So yes, now moving on to this last part where we're doing a lookup of a specific contact. So all we're doing is we are passing Wangari Maathai, and we search if the search in the contact book. So it's going to search directly in the contact book based on the key. If it finds that key, what you'll notice that we're not using a for loop, which is awesome when it comes to Python. You just say, hey, search, grab this name here, search in the contact book. So if you find anything there that has that value, please return that to me. And I'm just going to say print and then print that information. If not, it's just going to say print not found. So I'm going to run that again. As you can see, contact found, and it's returning Maathai. Now, like I said, this is very case sensitive. So if I do that and run the code one more time, you can see it says contact not found, when in actual fact it's just a letter. So maybe you want to come up with a scenario where you're handling, maybe before you process the information, you maybe probably want to make it to be lowercase, not in the database, for example, maybe because you want to avoid scenario where the name does exist, but because of the first capital letters, it sees it as non-existent, or not found. So those are things that you want to keep in mind when implementing a logic like this one. So that is basically what this lesson was all about. A quick revision of what we've gone through, and I hope you've learned something new. Until next time, keep well. Bye bye.